If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
All right, so we are back to talk more about Next Level Metabolism by Dr. Jade and
Teta.
And let's focus on the new science of metabolism. What does that mean?
Well, he talks about some laws in here.
And the 4 M's. So we're going to share those today and discuss. We'll start if you want to hear more about the book and about Dr. Jade, please listen to the previous episode where we go into that. But we're into what he calls the new science of metabolism. He says it's rooted in the idea that everyone is uniquely different. And don't we love that?
Oh, yes.
I love that so much. And let's...
I'm just going to have to put a shameless plug in here. In my 360 Health business, I have a assessment called meology. Me meaning you. And so everybody is different. So we also look at nutrition from a personalized point of view. And I think that's one of the things that's coming out of this book that I really resonates with me is Dr. Teta's philosophy of everybody is an individual. And that's, this uniquely different thing that you just talked about. So we have to explore that with our clients to see, what type are you? How do you function?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you guys have that meology.
Mm-hmm.
And at Well Balanced Nutrition, similarly, we, before even making any recommendations, we spend an hour and a half with our clients in an assessment, learning all about them from their sleep habits, stress, how they feel in the kitchen.
Yeah, and if they're on medications
and if they're on medication, family history. Yeah, we are all
risk
unique.
Factors, yeah.
And I appreciate that Dr. Jade is not just saying, here's what I prescribe.
Yep. It's not a one-size-fits-all for sure.
All right. So let's jump into the laws, the 3 laws he calls of metabolism.
Mm-hmm. The law of metabolic flexibility
is number 1. So remember how we said you don't want a fast metabolism, you want a flexible metabolism. Mm-hmm. And this we could go on and on about. So we want one that can adapt to the environment. And this brings back the whole traditional dieting problem.
Yeah. Let me just hit this thing there where he's talking about fast metabolism and why you don't want that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is because, and I'm just going to quote it, he says, the reasoning is simple. If you speed up metabolism, you also speed up hunger and cravings. Mm-hmm. And this is what so many of us struggle with. We go on these plans and these trends and these latest fad ideas, and we end up with these cravings that just ruin whatever benefit the program might have given us. And I know from my long history with activity, if I go out and do a really harsh workout or do a 5K or something like that, I'm ravenous afterwards. And then I might choose some high-calorie, non-nutrient-dense solutions to my craving and hunger. Mm-hmm, and then, just overdo whatever benefit would have happened.
Absolutely. And we read in the book from, oh my goodness, what's his name? We interviewed him.
Oh, Davis.
Yeah, Dr. Davis's book about the compensation, how that is a common thing, especially in females. When we burn a lot of calories at one time, it's so easy for our bodies and our minds to overcompensate. Yeah,
right, exactly.
So you're not alone. I've definitely experienced that too.
Yeah. And he says a flexible metabolism, however, doesn't let a lack of food send it straight to starvation behaviors. You want a metabolism that can adapt to the environmental stresses and strains it will experience. Mm-hmm. Because we know we're going to stress and strain. And that's your rubber band example that you were talking about.
Yes. Yep. We don't need to go over that again.
Mm-mm. So listen to last week if you want to hear about that one.
So he introduces traditional dieting as eating less and exercising more, which he abbreviates a lot as ELEM.
Yeah.
And he says that he goes into, part of having a flexible system is understanding that your metabolism will compensate. So why is it that we overcompensate, or why is it that we crave more things? Why is it that cravings go up and maybe even our movement goes down? Well, there's a little bit of science to that. And it starts with the Biggest Loser study.
Oh.
Are you familiar with the Biggest Loser study? He mentions it ever so briefly in the book.
Oh, I remember the trend, yes. And what was the gal's name?
Oh, Jillian Michaels. And she was a beast.
Yeah, she's a rock hard.
I'm bored with the pathetic story. It bores me. Get on the ladder. Are you ready to work? Are you ready to work? If you quit on me again, you go home, and no one's gonna chase you. No one. I hear you scream. Go. No. Keep running. Get on. 10 seconds. Go. Don't stop. Go. 10. Go. 9. Don't. 5 seconds.
Oh my God, that's a torture center. And how many years did we watch that?
Oh, way too many.
And
She was on it for 5 and then left, or was asked not to come back, I think.
Yeah, well, everyone that I know, and I personally know one person who's done this sort of a thing, and they got into beautiful body shape, but it did not last.
And that's what is interesting about this study is we were all just in so much awe about what they were able to achieve.
Transformation, huge.
So they followed 14 contestants during and after one season, and then this was published in the Journal of Obesity in 2016. Mm-hmm. So contestants lost an average of over 100 pounds each, which we saw that
in a short amount of time.
Very short. So they experienced extreme workouts, over an hour, 2 hours long, strenuous workouts, and then extreme calorie restriction.
Exactly.
As well. So they were creating this really large energy gap, and
it worked.
And it worked, kind of. Mm-hmm. So by the final weigh-in, here's what they found. Contestants' leptin levels had plummeted.
Mm-hmm. Now, leptin
is your satiety hormone. So it tells you I'm full, I don't want any more. So if that has plummeted, that means you're always feeling hungry or unsatisfied. So
even without ghrelin, or however you say the
ghrelin is the one that makes you feel hungry. Yeah.
Yeah. So even just a low leptin can create the same thing as a high ghrelin. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So on top of that, feeling hungry, which could explain those cravings and the overcompensation that tends to happen, their thyroid function, which governs metabolism and many other bodily functions, had slowed. Mm-hmm. So at the final weigh-in of the competition, this is what they were experiencing. Low leptin levels, so not ever feeling full, and they're a slow metabolism. So then they continue to follow them for 6 years after the show. Mm-hmm. Many regained a lot of the weight back. Mm-hmm. But this is the big but. Even though you would think that the metabolism changes would level back out, they did not. Mm-hmm. So now back or closer to their original weight, they still had that slow metabolism, and they still had those low leptin levels. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily that they were going back to their old ways per se. We don't know. We didn't follow their lives in that much detail. But it was part of it was that they were eating less food than ever, yet their metabolism had slowed down so drastically that the weight gain was almost inevitable.
Right.
And that just makes me so sad.
Yeah, because it can be a permanent reset.
And he goes in here that, there's debate in the field about how permanent and how much this is.
Yeah, I'm curious, Kristen. Somewhere along the line, I ran into some people that were talking about set points and resetting the set points. Is that kind of what this is a conversation about? Is that by that extreme deprivation and extreme over-exercising, they reset that barometer thermostat?
Barometric.
Well, I think
we said that metabolism is a barometer and a thermostat. Isn't that what we said earlier?
But I think that's saying that it's not this. That is their set point. So their metabolism is trying to get back to where it started. And I think what we know from the research is the only thing that changes set point is surgery, weight loss surgery. That's something that I kind of came across.
Now in this book, I don't think Dr. Teta even mentions that. Yeah, so let's hold that for another conversation.
But so it was Dr. Kevin Hall who did this study, and so he theorizes that because the contestants engaged in large, sustained periods of intense physical activity, their metabolism slowed substantially in order to reduce their metabolic rates and thereby minimize changes to their total energy expenditure. In other words, their bodies made automatic compensatory changes to maintain energy balance.
Which is the adaptability.
And now they still did keep some of the weight off, and there's a lot of people who were still exercising. And so he kind of, Dr. Kevin Hall kind of talks about, well, if they're still exercising, does that explain why their metabolism is still adapting? If they're still exercising like an hour a day. So it's just very interesting, but he goes into, Dr. Jade goes into explaining this. He calls it metabolic compensation, where when you eat less and exercise more, your metabolism will make up for that large energy gap by doing things like spontaneously and unconsciously reducing the amount of NEAT. So remember we talked about the non-exercise activity, so you might be less fidgety that day. You might just have lack of motivation to get up and move. Like when you said you did a big workout. So those kind of things happen, and we have to understand that that's what our metabolism is doing when we're putting those large gaps of energy, traditional dieting, for a long time, like the Biggest Losers did. So I think the exercise-associated compensation is something I run into a lot. Because have you ever done anything with MyFitnessPal?
With what?
MyFitnessPal. It's a calorie tracking app.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking all about how your metabolism changes and adapts. So isn't it funny that we just kind of put in a calculation and say, this is what we're burning every day, and so this is what we should eat every day? And I tell people, we're not robots, right? We will burn, and our needs will change every day. And, but, so, we assume, so we'll put in this app that let's say I burn 2,000 calories at rest, and then I go out on a run, or I get my move goal of 300 calories. So we assume that all adds up to 2,300 calories.
So energy in, energy out equals zero?
Yeah.
Gain?
Yeah. So that doesn't take into consideration metabolic adaptation.
Yeah.
So I tell people to turn that feature off, right? Like, don't assume that it's getting it right, that you just burn 300 calories, so you're eating 300 more calories to make up for it.
Yeah. I kind of, as we get to the end of this book, wonder what this author recommends, because one of the balks or resistance I have to what he's talking about is so much obsession with this, the tweaking and everything of your day. It's like life becomes focused on this, and I think life is more than what we eat and move. So anyway, that tracking thing is very popular with a lot of people on meticulous tracking. How much water am I drinking? How much food? What kind of calories am I getting? Am I getting this percentage or that percentage from this food source? And pretty soon, I think the mental stress that comes with that counteracts any physiological from whatever that plan might have been. So that is one of the things that Dr. Teta does talk about. And the 4 M's, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's get through these laws where we have flexibility, right? Is the first law.
Right. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about pops and bugs.
Oh, yeah, baby. You know I do. Pops are persistent organic pollutants, and bugs would be the microbiome. And you all know, if you've been following our little Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we did read a book or two about the gut, the mind-gut connection, and a healthy gut, healthy you, and the microbiome. So I believe the current thought is that we have a lot of bacteria in and on our body that contribute to our health. They are making chemicals that act like neurotransmitters, and some of these neurotransmitters Dr. Teta calls hormones, and he was pretty clear in his definitions of how he's writing. He says, look, I'm going to call some things that other people won't, but it's just to simplify my conversation in this book to convey the ideas. And I really respected his acknowledging that he was maybe stepping across the line, but for a good reason, and I advocate for it because I think it does make sense. Because these hormones like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, we've talked about them in other books.
Yeah.
Some of those are made by bacteria. And, then they talk, so the second brain of our gut is second brain, first brain, we don't know. It's a conversation about who's driving the truck here, the gut or the brain. So, so in here we need to make sure that these bacteria are fed properly and that the colonizations are good and that they're the healthy bacteria versus the pathogenic bacteria. But then yet again, everybody's different. He's even talking about we have a microbiome fingerprint. My group of organisms is different than yours, and probably in my family, because we've all exposed each other, will be different than your children. So that's part of this metabolic story too, because those gut bacteria have to be healthy. Even the ones on our skin, we don't talk so much about those, but we're learning more about those. And then the POPs, the persistent organic pollutants. We could probably, and we should read another book on this whole topic, because we are being exposed in modern day culture to so many synthetics that our ancestors were not exposed to. And so our stressful lifestyle plus these organic toxins, which disrupt some of these hormonal balances, and in particular the ones that we are really worried about are the estrogen disruptors, because they mimic estrogen, and so the fluctuations in estrogen over a lifetime can be counteracted by these chemical exposures. So part of what we need to do is be cognizant about reducing exposures, and then even though we reduce them, we're retaining these pollutants in our fat cells. So when we are overweight and obese, which this estrogen disruption can cause, and we put these toxins into our fat cells, which make more estrogen, and then we burn the fat, we release those organic pollutants, and then they can retoxify us. So he brings all this complicated environmental exposure story up and acknowledges it as a factor.
And you're right. We could have a whole book and several podcasts on it, so maybe we should.
Yeah, we'll look for that one.
All right, so law number 2 is metabolic individuality. And he explains this with 4 Ps. So our physiology is different, whether that's genetics, epigenetics, our varied hunger responses, just the different things that make our body unique. Then psychology is the second P. So think we all have different personalities and preferences.
And we some of us are more inclined to anxiety than others.
Maybe more motivated in certain ways. Maybe we respond to stress differently.
Some are optimists, some are pessimists.
That's right. The third P is personal preferences, like individual habits, what we like to eat and don't like to eat, assumptions and expectations that we have. And then the fourth P is our practical circumstances. So important, right? Our access to food, our environment.
Yeah, and even, our employment during their working years. That influences so much of our preferences, because I need to make a living. And so if I go into a building, or I go into a factory, or I go into a car or a truck and spend hours in these places, kind of restricts some of the other things I can do.
Absolutely.
If I'm traveling a lot, I can't go to the gym, my local gym, every day. not going to happen. I'm not there.
Right out of college, I had the opportunity to help out a company of truck drivers. And it's like, wow, how can I help you guys nutrition-wise? That is a true challenge. And it's the same as like night shift workers, right? That's a nutritional challenge too. So
that's a practical circumstance of that individual that may not be like you or me.
And that's why we need to take in
I love
consideration
it.
all
love
of these
it.
things.
Yes.
Yep, right on point, Dr. Jade.
Yeah, we love you.
All right, law number 3 is psychic entropy. I like this one a lot.
Oh, yeah, I can spend a lot of time on entropy. That's a thermodynamic law, you guys. And I always say, my house, I clean it, and within 20 minutes, it's chaos again. Because entropy is, the energy is going to not stay organized.
Yep. Well, he refers to it as brain drain.
Absolutely. Your brain falls apart.
And this, I feel, is so important. And we covered these topics a lot that were like kind of off the beaten path, but they covered this topic, right? Brain drain. When you are depleted, you have to recharge. And so this goes into things like our forest bathing podcast and book. Things like massage and mindfulness and meditation and our yoga podcast. Sex.
He's bringing that up, doesn't he?
He does.
Which is good, because a lot of times we avoid that topic, but there's benefits to orgasms, according to him.
Well, you disagree?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. But that idea to let the brain recharge and take that time for yourself. And he talks about, the practical circumstance of women in particular, because he loves women. I get a sense that he really, really appreciates the woman. But, when you're taking care of 3 kids working, that's a circumstance that will take your brain to this entropy or a brain drain, perhaps. And you might not make the best choices and you start throwing fast food at your kids.
Right. Well, it brings us to the willpower.
Yep.
Topic, right?
Absolutely.
Because when we're brain drained, we can't rely on willpower. Willpower is not an endless source. And so if we're not taking care of our mental energy and taking time to rest and recharge, then why are we spinning our wheels with these dieting attempts or whatever?
Anyway.
Yeah. So I love that this is in there as a law of metabolism, is and how important it is to rest and recharge.
Yeah, and he's going to be talking about movement some more. We're going to talk about that. But walking in nature is one of the best ways to recharge. And I don't mean power walking, which actually can drain your battery as you push yourself to walk fast and burn as many calories as possible. I mean strolling, looking at trees, taking in your environment, and just enjoying the moment of being outside. So if there's, in these when your brain's down, just step outside and take a slow walk. Mm-hmm. And then your brain may come back into control again. It's such a simple thing.
It is.
Doesn't cost money. It's available, but we forget to do it.
Go look at the trees, listen to the birds. Yeah. All right, so those are the 3 laws. Mm-hmm. And then he goes into the 4 M's, which are the areas we can consciously influence or impact metabolic output. So the energy that we're using, the total energy expenditure. So do you want to go over those?
Yeah, well, I'll go over the first one, mindfulness or mindset.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, last night I was not going to join my mindfulness group, and I've kind of dropped off the radar on doing my meditation. And I'm reading this book, and I went, I'm doing it because it's something I need to be doing. My brain was engaged, so I got on my meditation group, and I'm so glad I did.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I set an intention, and the intention is helping me today very much because I was a little stressed about today coming up.
Same.
Why?
Because we hadn't done it for a while, and I wanted to be perfect.
Yes.
I want to really make a difference in somebody's life if they listen to this. So, I don't know that can happen or not, but that's my intention, is that this is helping somebody somewhere.
I love it.
It's making me at least think of things because, I don't read a lot. And this makes me so I don't have to. But you're still educating within the
This
realm.
group,
So
good.
I like it.
So, like I've said, if we just
I'm part of a book
Tim,
club that doesn't require me to actually read something.
Well, and y'all, if you enjoy the podcast, learn anything, have any suggestions, we can't tell you how much your feedback would
Helps
mean
us.
to us and help us. Rate it, leave a review. That really helps us continue to do what we're doing. And, we do want it to be impactful. So go on, Eleanor.
Yeah, so just before we leave the mindfulness M, that's the first of the 4 M's that we're going to embrace as part of our metabolic detective journey. We've talked about walking outside and being in a green setting, but listening to music, that's what Tim does, I think, to recharge his brain. Cuddling with pets, taking a bath. But the one that I've also personally been struggling with is I consider myself a creative person, but I can't really point to any things that I've created lately, and it's like in my mind as to why. Why is this not happening? And what I think I need to do is just do some creative things. And so he says doodling, coloring, playing an instrument, reduce your stress. So a lot of times we think it has to be, sitting in a dark room or taking the walk, but it can also be a creative engagement that allows this mindful, your mind doesn't think about all the little trash monkey noise. It gets shut down when you get involved in a creative experience.
I appreciate this because I don't always consider creative
I don't either.
work in with this resetting or recharging the battery, but it makes a ton of sense because at Well Balanced Nutrition, we talk about what fills your cup, what makes you feel like you. And for me, if I haven't done anything creative, I don't feel fulfilled. And it's like a struggle because at Well Balanced Nutrition, I call myself the Chief Creative Officer. So if there's a creative project, I'm the leader on that, whether that's a website design or whatever it might be. And so I'm being creative, which is my me time, my free space, but it's also work. So I've had this inner battle with myself, is this really recharging? Because it's work. But so I appreciate that. Just because it's productive doesn't mean it's not recharging me because it's that creative piece that I need.
Yeah, and it's allowing you to focus on that creative process. And it does shut down some of these other noises.
Does. I get in the zone,
right,
and I can do it for hours. That's how I know, okay, this is me.
And then you also, particularly when you're working with technology, creativity, things I have experienced, there's a point where then it becomes anxiety producing, and that's when you need to step away. The benefit of it is of that creative thing. It gets confounded by maybe it's not working, the technical steps are not there, and it didn't do what you thought it would do.
Yep.
And you just go, and that's when you say, okay, stop, walk away. Because I have fallen in that hole many times and gone into an anxiety-producing depressive episode of I just spent 3 hours on something that was supposed to take 15 minutes. And I really,
that's so frustrating.
I really just wanted to show the world this beautiful, morning glory or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but that's an awareness level. All right, well, we could talk about mindfulness, and we have in some books, and we'll probably do it again because it's a good topic. Second M is movement. You want to take that one?
Sure. So we've already talked about the difference between walking and exercise. And so when we talk about movement, we're talking about walking and daily activity. And he puts these in order, by the way, right? I think of importance.
Yes, he does.
So
priority, yeah.
1, mindset and mindfulness. 2 is movement. So that daily walking, the 10,000 steps, 20,000 steps. And I just got an Apple Watch. I'm not up there at 10,000 steps. That's kind of hard to do, especially when you're
sitting in a podcast studio.
In a podcast, sitting with clients.
Right.
So when he said 20,000, I was like,
I've never heard anybody say that. I was blown away when he said it. I went, are you kidding me? Because
that's a lot.
The benefits I've heard are really breaking out at 5,000 and 7,000. Then anything above those is just extra, but the minimum is 5 to 7. 1,000 steps. But he was 10, and you jack it on up to 20 if you can.
Yeah.
But don't go beyond 20, he said.
So No.
And it's like, good God, what would you have to do to get 20,000 steps a day?
Well, he says that it's, 2 miles? Is that right?
Nah.
I feel like that's what he said in there. That's
In
why.
Paris,
Oh, yeah. How much did you walk?
I averaged about 12 to 13,000.
Okay, and that's one of he does bring up Paris and some of these European lifestyle cities, because he said the little old lady that goes to the market every day with the 2 bags, and she walks 7 blocks and then up 4 flights of steps to her apartment because there's not an elevator, and that's kind of what you do in some of these European places, and they're healthy. They live long, functional, engaging lives. Some of them.
Yeah. It was rough, but...
Well, for you as an American, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not used to that.
This is true.
Yeah.
But I trudged through it. I took one for the team. A team beaming.
Well, now that you're back here, maybe you could incorporate some of that movement into your routine.
Yeah. Probably not going to happen, but...
All right.
Well,
the thought is nice.
Yeah. The struggle is real because I feel like I've talked about this a lot. You go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking about it when we were in Disney World and we were walking and standing in line and zigzagging. We recently went to Hilton Head where you get to bike and walk everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you come back home, and especially in the world we've been in the past couple years of being at home a lot, it's like you only have to the kitchen and to your desk and to your bedroom to walk. So you really have to be creative on how you get those steps. But yeah, 10 to 20 is a whole lot. I recommend just knowing where you are and seeing if you can bump it up 100 to 200 steps.
And I will say your watch, I don't like the Fitbit on your watch, but I do like the step counter because I can look at that and say, I really have been sedentary. Let's stand up. And I have a friend who, whenever she's on the phone, she stands up and she walks.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And it's a simple thing, yeah.
Just pace back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. Everybody can do that.
My watch tells me, get up and move.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Mine does too. I like that. And then I get points if I stand on the hour for so long. I think that's, what Dr. Jade was saying, that movement matters. If we're sitting for long periods of time and we go work out for an hour in the gym, that's still putting so much stress on our body. So we're meant to move and be flexible. So do what it takes.
And he says that sensitizes us to insulin.
Yes.
And so insulin is one of those things that if you're resistant to insulin, it can cause your blood sugars to go up because they're not being absorbed into the cells. And that can cause some peripheral damage in your vasculature. And then you end up with a pre-diabetic condition or a diabetic condition, which, with a little bit of movement, you might be able to keep those the sensitivity to your insulin where it needs to be.
Which would be a good reason to maybe incorporate a walk after dinner because it helps your cells take in that energy. Yeah. And in the evening, that's when, based on our body clock, that's when our metabolism can be slower than it is in the morning. So an after dinner walk would be a great thing to incorporate. I'm glad you brought that up, the insulin sensitivity, because another reason he has movement as number 2 over exercise is because it's the only thing that doesn't really ramp up cravings and hunger when you do it that much.
Well, and that's one of the things it's doing is lowering cortisol.
And lowering cortisol. So several
stress
reasons.
Stress hormone.
We underestimate the
intricacy.
Impact
Yeah, the
of
intricacy.
movement.
Yeah.
So it helps with insulin sensitivity. It helps with lowering cortisol, and it does not cause intense cravings or hunger.
Yeah, and if you're doing your laundry and doing your gardening and cleaning your house, other things are happening too.
It's productive as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3.
Meals, what you put in your mouth is what we call a meal, although some of us graze all day long, so I don't know if that's a meal or not. But, the quantity and quality are important, and then the timing and frequency is also important with meals. So that idea that we are what we eat may be true. Vitamins and minerals are included in that food. So that's, when you're looking at quality of food, you're looking at nutritional density those sorts of things. And fiber and water are important. So, do you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think we could get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
But it does say that there's no one-size-fits-all in that area. And then metabolics, which is his catch-all for the actual exercise, supplements, and other metabolics that impact or, what do we say? What do we like to say? Bump up your metabolism or whatever.
And he does include surgery in there, I noticed, but he doesn't expound on that much at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the 4 M's. We got mindfulness, movement, meals, and metabolics.
Those are the places to focus if you want to have a nice, flexible metabolism.
And I would say the other thing that he hits hard here is, in the rest of the book, is the Goldilocks zone. Y'all remember the story about Goldilocks? Not too much, not too little, just right. And so with these 4 M's, that's what you're looking for, is getting that really nice, not too much, not too little, and just right. The Goldilocks zone.
That's right. So remember that your metabolism will compensate. It will adapt to what is going on, so treat it nicely. Remember that it is individualized to you based on your physiology, psychology, preferences, and your practical circumstances, and that psychic entropy matters. Take care and recharge because that plays a much bigger role than you give it credit
The
for.
number one position in his chart.
Mindset and mindfulness.
So I'm Eleanor at 360health4u.com, and we like to talk about metabolics and metabolism and lifestyle. Reach out, we'll continue our conversation, and you might do a meology assessment with me.
And I'm Kristen Norton at Well Balanced Nutrition, where we offer nutrition and wellness coaching. It is covered by some insurance. Visit us at wellbalancednutrition.com for more information and to schedule your free clarity call today.
And stay tuned, because we're going to keep talking about this book.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.